This happened about 10 years ago. I grew up in a small house, sharing a bedroom with my older brother. Two twin beds, two dressers, two closets, barely enough space to move around. When he left for college, I immediately claimed the room as my own, moved his bed out, and finally got a desk in there. For 2 quiet years, it was perfect. When I left for college, my brother eventually moved back home after graduation and reclaimed the room. Fair enough, since I'd done the same. But when I finished school and moved back home myself, there wasn't much space left. The only open room was a small guest bedroom upstairs, right next to my dad's office and directly above the garage. Every time the garage door opened, the floor would vibrate for about 10 seconds. It wasn't ideal, but it was private and quiet. One Friday night that summer, I was completely alone in the house. My parents were staying at our family's shore house for the weekend, and my brother was in Baltimore for work. I'd had a long day, so I ordered some food, climbed into bed, and started reading. By 11:30, the house was silent, peaceful even. Then I heard it, the low rumble of the garage door opening. The floor beneath me began to shake, just like it always did. At first, I didn't think much of it, until I remembered. No one was supposed to be home. My parents weren't due back until Sunday. My brother wasn't coming back until the next afternoon. That's when my heart started pounding. I got out of bed and looked out the window toward the driveway. The garage door was open. The driveway itself was dark, too dark to see if there was a car inside. I didn't think. I just grabbed one of the old baseball bats from the closet and crept downstairs. I tried to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe my parents had come home early. Maybe the door malfunctioned. Maybe. Then I heard voices. Two of them. Low, muffled, coming from my parents' bedroom on the other side of the house. Drawers were opening. Things were being moved. That's when I knew. Someone had broken in. My hands are shaking as I pulled out my phone, whispered my address to the 911 operator, and said someone was inside my house. She told me to stay hidden, stay quiet. But something in me snapped, maybe adrenaline, maybe fear, and I decided I wasn't going to just sit there. I tightened my grip on the bat and made my way toward the voices. The sound of rummaging grew louder. I stopped outside my parents' door, took one deep breath, and charged inside, yelling as loud as I could. Two men were digging through my mother's closet. They froze. One of them cursed as I swung the bat and caught him in the leg. He fell, screaming. Before I could swing again, the other one slammed into me, tackling me to the floor. He was bigger, much bigger, and he easily ripped the bat from my hands. His fingers closed around my throat, cutting off my breath. I clawed at his hands, struggling to breathe, when I saw the other guy crawling toward us with something shiny in his hand. A knife. That was the moment I realized how badly I'd messed up. I wasn't a hero. I was about to die. Then, somewhere in the distance, I heard police sirens. The man above me hesitated. His partner shouted something. The last thing I saw was the second man grabbing my baseball bat. Then everything went black. When I woke up, a police officer was kneeling next to me, shaking my shoulder. My head was pounding. The back door of my parents' room was wide open. They had fled the second they heard the sirens. The officer told me to stay still in case I had a concussion, but I refused to go to the hospital. I gave them my full statement, but by the time they canvassed the area, the men were gone. They were never caught. A few days later, as the fear began to fade, something started bothering me. The garage door. It could only be opened using a small wireless button, one that my dad had programmed and kept inside his car. The only way the intruders could have known about it was if they'd been in that car before. And the timing, they knew exactly when my brother and parents would be gone. Whoever those men were, they knew my family. My parents installed a full security system after that. Cameras, lights, motion sensors, everything. But that didn't stop the unease. Because no matter how much time has passed, I still remember that moment on the floor, the moment I accepted I was going to die. There's life before you face death, and life after you realize how close it came to finding you. It's been 6 months, and I still get chills when I think about that night. Not because of what was stolen, but because of how personal it all was. I had recently moved back to my hometown to help care for my aging mother. She lives about 20 minutes away, close enough for me to get there quickly if she needs me, but far enough that I could still have my own space. I found a small duplex that felt perfect. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I was finally settling in. My mother's health had started to slip a bit. Nothing too serious, but she'd had a few minor falls around the house. I've been trying to convince her to get one of those medical alert bracelets, but she insisted she didn't need one. "You worry too much," she'd say. "I'm fine." But the thought of her being alone all day gnawed at me constantly. That evening, I was home on the couch, half watching a show, half scrolling through my phone. It was around 9 when my phone rang. The number was local, one I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but since I was still new in town, I figured it might be important. When I answered, a calm, professional woman's voice came through. She said she was a nurse at the local hospital, the same one I knew my mother's doctor used. Her tone was serious but gentle. She said, "Your mother has been brought in after a fall. She hit her head, but she's conscious and asking for you. We'd like you to come as soon as possible." My heart dropped. This was exactly the call I had been dreading. She used my mother's full name, her address. She even mentioned that my mom had recently had hip surgery, something few people outside the family knew. I didn't question a thing. I just froze for a second, then bolted into action. I grabbed my keys, slipped on shoes, and ran out the door without even locking it. My only thought was get to Mom. The drive to the hospital was torture. Every red light felt like an eternity. My mind replayed every possible scenario: head trauma, a broken hip, internal bleeding, until I was practically shaking. When I finally pulled into the ER parking lot, I sprinted inside and straight to the reception desk. "I'm here for my mother," I said, breathless. She was brought in about an hour ago after a fall. The receptionist typed something into her computer, frowned slightly, and said, "What's her name again?" I repeated it. She checked again. Then she looked up and said, "I'm sorry, there's no one by that name here tonight." I blinked, confused. That can't be right. I just got a call from one of your nurses. She said my mother was here, that she hit her head. The receptionist's face softened. That mix of concern and careful professionalism people use when they think you might be mistaken. "We don't have any record of her being admitted," she said gently. "Maybe you should try calling her, just to be sure." I stepped outside and dialed my mother's number with trembling hands. She answered on the second ring, groggy, a little annoyed. "Why are you calling so late?" she asked. I just stood there for a moment, staring at the glowing hospital sign. "I just wanted to check on you," I said. "Go back to bed, Mom." And that's when it hit me. There had been no fall, no nurse, no emergency. Someone had wanted me out of my house. I jumped back in my car and sped home. My street was quiet, the same as I'd left it. The front door was still closed. For a second, I almost laughed. Maybe I was overreacting. But the second I stepped inside, I knew. Drawers were open, closets ransacked, my TV gone, my laptop gone, jewelry box empty. But the strangest thing was what wasn't taken. The frames on my living room wall were still there, but the photos inside them were missing, just the pictures, neatly removed. In my bathroom, the cabinet was open, and all my empty prescription bottles were gone. Not the medications, the bottles. My name, my doctor's name, my pharmacy. I stood there, numb, realizing this wasn't just a random burglary. Whoever had done this had known exactly what they were doing, and exactly who I was. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, I told them everything, the call, the details the woman had known, the missing items. The officers exchanged a look, then told me something that made my stomach twist. They'd heard of similar scams, rare but not unheard of. Sometimes thieves create a fake emergency to lure someone out of their house. But they usually don't go to this level, not with personal information, and not with such specific emotional manipulation. That meant the caller knew things about me and my mother that weren't public. Things only a few people could possibly know. The officers asked if anyone outside the family might have access to that kind of information, a caregiver, a neighbor, even a family friend. I thought about it for a long time. The only person who regularly interacted with others was my mom. She's friendly, maybe too friendly sometimes, and talks openly with people at her church, at the grocery store, even with delivery drivers. I realized then that it wouldn't take much for someone to piece together details about her. Her surgery, her living situation, her daughter who just moved back. The police took my statement, but they were honest. Without leads or witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to call if I remembered anything else, and then they left. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, the same spot I'd been in before the call, staring at the empty wall where my photos used to be. I couldn't stop replaying the voice of that nurse in my head. Calm, kind, convincing. Whoever she was, she hadn't just stolen from me. She'd studied me. She'd known exactly which buttons to push, which fears to exploit. And what scared me most was the sense that it wasn't over. Why take family photos? Why prescription bottles? Not things of value, but things tied to identity. For weeks, I waited for something else to happen. A strange letter, a call, a sign, but nothing came. Just silence, which in some ways felt worse. I changed my locks, installed cameras, moved my valuables into a safe. My mother and I even came up with a secret code word, something only we would know in case of another call. She finally admitted that she might have been too open with people lately. Maybe she'd mentioned me to someone who seemed kind. Maybe they'd asked just the right questions. Even now, every time my phone rings from a number I don't recognize, my stomach knots. It's not the stolen things that keep me awake at night. It's knowing that someone out there learned everything they needed to manipulate me perfectly. They didn't just break into my house. They broke into my life. And sometimes when I check my Ring camera before bed, I swear I feel like someone's still watching, waiting for the next move. I've been renting this small house for a little over a year now. It's not fancy, but it's mine, a quiet spot in a peaceful neighborhood, the kind of place where you can actually hear the crickets at night. I live alone, and over time, I've settled into a comfortable routine. It's not just a rental anymore. It's home. At least I thought it was. It was a Thursday night, just after midnight, when I heard the pounding. Not a knock, a pounding. Heavy, furious, like someone trying to break the door off its hinges. I froze halfway down the hall, heart hammering. The sound came again, thud, thud, thud. Whoever was out there wasn't just impatient. They were enraged. The porch light barely illuminates the steps, so when I peeked through the window, all I saw was a shape, a man shifting his weight, head jerking around like he was arguing with himself. I wasn't scared yet, mostly confused and maybe a little annoyed. I opened the main door just a crack, keeping the screen latched. A man stood there, breathing hard, sweat shining on his forehead despite the cool air. His clothes looked slept in, his hair wild. He looked a few years older than me, mid-30s maybe. Before I could say anything, he shouted, "What are you doing in my house?" I blinked. "What? This is my house," he snapped, slamming his hand against the screen. "You need to get out before I call the police." At first I thought he was drunk or high or having some kind of breakdown. His movements were twitchy and erratic, but his eyes, they were sharp, focused. He believed what he was saying. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Hey man, you got the wrong place. I rent this house. I've lived here for over a year." He shook his head, breathing faster. No, I've lived here for years." He started pacing across the porch. Then he stopped and stared at me with this strange, almost triumphant expression. "If this isn't my house," he said, "then tell me why the bedroom door hits the toilet when you open it." My blood went cold. He wasn't guessing. He was listing facts. "You have to lift the back door handle to get it to turn, right?" he continued, stepping closer. "And the hallway light flickers if you turn it on too fast. You still got that crack in the kitchen tile near the fridge." I didn't say a word. Every single thing he said was true. He pulled a folder from under his arm and held up a paper against the screen. It was a lease agreement printed with my address, this address, but his name was on it. The dates were from about 6 months before I'd moved in. Then he showed me mail addressed to him. Same street, same number. Everything looked official. Stamps, postmarks, return addresses. "I live here," he said again, his voice trembling. "You shouldn't be here." I tried to process what I was seeing. I told him my landlord owned this place, that no one else lived here before me. He just glared, then reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and started scrolling through pictures. The first one was of him sitting on a couch. My couch. Then one of him cooking in my kitchen. Same countertops, same coffee maker. Then another of him lying in bed, my bed. I felt my chest tighten. The photos didn't look old. They weren't blurry or staged. They looked recent, natural, real. And then he showed me one that made my stomach drop. It was dated July 4th, just a few months ago. He was sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. They were smiling, raising drinks, fireworks visible through the window behind them. On the counter sat a box of fireworks, the exact brand and packaging I bought that same day. I know I was home alone that night. I remember watching the fireworks from my porch. I remember texting friends. But there was proof that someone else had been living in my house. On the same day, in the same room, I started to feel dizzy. "Where did you get those?" I asked, barely able to speak. He didn't answer. He just stared at me through the screen, like he was waiting for me to admit something. Finally, I said, "I'm calling the police. They'll sort this out." His expression changed immediately. The panic drained from his face. His breathing slowed. "Okay," he said quietly. "Go ahead." Then he stepped back, turned around, and walked away into the dark. When the police showed up, he was gone. I told them everything. The pounding, the lease, the photos. They listened, exchanged a look, and one of them said it sounded like a mental health episode. They suggested I talk to my landlord about former tenants. Then they left. I called my landlord first thing the next morning. He'd never heard of anyone matching that description. He'd owned the house his whole life. The last tenants were a quiet couple who'd lived there for 3 years. He gave me their number, and when I reached them, they were just as confused. They'd never heard of the man, never shared the place, and had no idea how he could know those details. I wanted to believe it was over, that it had just been some unhinged stranger. But 2 weeks later, I came home from a night out to find my front door unlocked. Inside, the house was torn apart. Every drawer, every cabinet, every closet, emptied. Not ransacked for valuables, but searched like someone was looking for something specific. My TV, my laptop, my wallet, untouched. The police said there was no sign of forced entry. That meant whoever had done it had a key. That's when the fear really sank in. Because the only person who could have had a key, other than me or my landlord, was that man. After that, my landlord replaced all the locks and installed extra security cameras. No charge. The cops filed a report and told me to call if anything else happened. But the questions kept eating at me. Who was he? How did he have photos of himself in my house? Why did he know so much about it? Things no one else should know. Sometimes I wonder if the lease he showed me was forged, or if he somehow got hold of old records. But that doesn't explain the photos, the people in them, the fireworks on the counter, the look on his face. Lately, I've started noticing small things out of place. Nothing dramatic, just off. A chair slightly turned. A drawer left open when I'm sure I closed it. Once, when I came home from work, the back door was unlocked. Just barely. Not wide open, just unlatched. It happens enough that I've started checking every lock twice before bed. And sometimes, late at night, I catch a faint smell in the hallway, cigarette smoke. The same smell that clung to his clothes that night. Maybe he really was delusional. Maybe he's gone for good. But every so often, I wake up in the middle of the night with the unshakable feeling that someone else is standing in the dark just beyond my bedroom door, waiting for me to remember that this was never really my house, that I'm the one who doesn't belong here.